People make a dangerous assumption when they lie to an empath. They assume empathy means gullibility. They assume kindness means blindness. They assume emotional depth somehow weakens perception. But the truth is often the opposite. The very qualities that make an empath compassionate are often the same qualities that make them extraordinarily difficult to deceive. Because empaths are not just listening to language, they're observing patterns. They're reading emotional signals most people overlook. They notice the hesitation before a sentence, the forced smile that arrives a second too late, the shift in tone when certain names are mentioned, the contradiction between what someone says and what their nervous system appears to be communicating. And this is where many people misunderstand intuition. They think intuition is mystical, vague, irrational. But much of what we call intuition is actually pattern recognition operating beneath conscious awareness. An empath may not immediately say you're lying. In fact, often they won't. But they feel something distort. Something doesn't align. And that inner signal stays alive even when they try to dismiss it. Psychologists have long understood that human communication is layered. Words carry one message. Behavior often carries another. Emotional congruence or incongruence reveals a third. Empaths are unusually sensitive to incongruence. They can sense when a person's words are trying to outrun their.
Why did your story become over-explained? Why does your apology sound rehearsed instead of felt? These are not random impressions. These are observations. And here's something even deeper. Empaths often understand pain, guilt, fear, and shame because they have studied those emotions in themselves. They recognize emotional signatures because they have lived them. That makes deception harder to disguise in front of someone who knows what internal conflict looks like. This is why people who lie to empaths often become frustrated. They feel seen in ways they didn't consent to. They sense that their performance is not landing the way they expected. And sometimes they mistake this for judgment, when really it is perception. Now, this does not mean empaths are never deceived. In fact, many empaths stay in deceptive dynamics far longer than they should, but not because they fail to sense dishonesty. Often because they sense it and then override themselves. They rationalize. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe love means giving the benefit of the doubt one more time. And this is one of the great internal battles of the empath. Not detecting truth, trusting what they detect. Because many sensitive people have been conditioned to question their own perceptions, especially if they've dealt with gaslighting, manipulation, or environments where truth was constantly distorted. They may sense the lie in. They think because an empath stays quiet, they don't notice. Because an empath doesn't immediately confront, they don't understand. Because an empath gives grace, they must be unaware. And I'm wrong. The empath sees far more than they reveal. They may be watching. They may be waiting. They may be giving you space to tell the truth voluntarily. Because empaths at their healthiest do not rush to accuse. They observe. They verify. They allow reality to expose itself. And reality always exposes itself. Because lies have a structural weakness. They require maintenance. Truth sustains itself. Falsehood requires constant repair. And over time, most deception collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The empath knows this, even if only intuitively. This is why many empaths appear calm in the presence of dishonesty. Not because they are fooled, but because they understand something profound. Truth does not need to panic. And there is something almost philosophical in this. A lie is not just false information. It is an attempt to impose an artificial reality. And empaths, by their nature, are oriented toward authenticity, toward what is real beneath performance.
toward what is emotionally true beneath what is socially convenient. That is why lying to an empath is so destructive. Because you are not merely giving false facts. You are violating the very principle they organize human connection around. And they feel that deeply, sometimes before you even finish speaking.
They are reading patterns, and patterns rarely lie. So if you think deception protects you from being seen, understand this. You may hide facts for a moment. You may delay consequences for a season, but you cannot consistently fake alignment in front of someone trained by life to notice what does not align. And that is why lying to an empath is never as invisible as you think. Because the first person deception exposes is often the deceiver. And that leaves us with something worth remembering. When words and energy conflict, believe the pattern. Truth whispers long before it proves itself. And once deception is sensed, something even more profound begins to unfold. Because with an empath, a lie is rarely interpreted as just a false statement. It is experienced as a fracture in the emotional architecture of trust. And most people underestimate what trust actually is. They treat trust like a casual social agreement, a convenience, a default setting in relationships. But to an empath, trust is something much deeper. It is psychological safety. It is the invisible structure that allows vulnerability to exist. It is the unspoken contract that says what is real between us can be honored. And when that contract is broken through deception, the damage is rarely about the content of the lie alone. It is about what the lie means. Because when someone lies to an empath, the wound is not simply, you gave me false information. The wound is, you made me build emotional reality around something unreal. And that is betrayal. Betrayal is not disagreement. It is not conflict. It is not even necessarily wrongdoing. Betrayal is the collapse of trusted reality. And that hits an empath differently because empaths do not connect superficially. They invest through meaning, through emotional coherence, through felt honesty. So when dishonesty enters that bond, it does not stay at the surface. It echoes through everything the relationship was built on. Suddenly, the empath is not only questioning the lie, they are questioning every moment surrounding it. Was that apology sincere? Was that promise real? Were those words ever true? Was I loved honestly, or was I managed?